Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan, and we have a very special guest on the program. It's been a while, and I don't even know exactly how many years it's been, but it has been a while when we were talking about, I don't know, there's a little problem going on. I think it was a God problem or the God problem. Big old thick volume. But
Right.
Today we're going to talk about another interesting subject. To me, it's right up the same alley, and that is the case of the sexual cosmos. And I'm fascinated by this and what we're going to talk about with our very special guest, Howard Bloom. Howard, thank you for joining us here on the program.
Richard, it's wonderful to see you again.
You know, I had the great pleasure of working with another gentleman here back in Phoenix, Arizona, my hometown. He was a printer. He ran a print shop called Papago Printing, and he had these personal growth programs. They were called Omega Vector and Delta Vector. One transitioned into the other. And he wanted to record something really fascinating. And it had to do with the sexual aspects of human existence. And we're not talking about the lower base aspects of it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we're talking about one of the things that he talked about was the fact that nothing that exists here, since man has been here, exists without having sexual energy being used. And I thought that was an interesting connection that he made. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on that as we dive into this wonderful the book that you have, beautiful woman on the cover too, by the way, regarding the case of the sexual cosmos. It seems to me that's the energy of creation, and that's what we called it, sexual energy. I
Right.
don't know what the cosmos calls it.
Well, the universe has only been around or has been around for 13.73 billion years, and sex has only been around for 1 to 2 billion years. And the reason the book is called The Case of the Sexual Cosmos, Everything You Know About Nature is Wrong, is because there are 2 basic rules in science that you must swear onto if you want to be a legitimate part of the scientific community.
Hmm.
And the big one is called the second law of thermodynamics. And that law says that all things tend toward entropy, toward a maximum of entropy in this universe. And entropy means disorder, chaos, uselessness. And that's the very opposite of this universe. You have to swear on to that, but that is not this universe at all. This universe is obstreperous, it's rebellious, it has moxie, especially when you get up to 4 billion years ago when life is created.
Hmm.
So if you remember the days when you had a metal slinky and you
Oh
put your
yeah.
slinky up at the top of the staircase and you just gave it a slight shove and
Mm-hmm.
it went down methodically, step after step after step. And according to the second law of thermodynamics and the theory of entropy, that's the universe. The universe is constantly decaying, moving down that staircase to the very bottom. This is an idea left over from 1851 from the study of steam engines. A guy named William Thomson, who was a professor of natural philosophy, today we call that science, um, came up with the idea that in a steam engine, only 20% of its energy is used, the rest is dissipated in friction. And then he generalized that to the entire world. In 1851, he went from a principle of steam engines to the entire cosmos. That was outrageous. And then in science, he started making predictions. In science, if you make a prediction and your prediction doesn't come true, it's time to reevaluate your theory, to change it so it can make accurate predictions or to discard it altogether. And his first prediction, a guy named Charles Darwin came out with a book 7 years later. And and at first, William Thomson, the guy who'd come up with this steam engine dissipating its energy, refused to read it. And in the history of science, you won't find out the reason because the reason is that he was religious, and that is never told in telling the story of his life.
Mm.
And what Darwin was talking about, species individually self-assembling, basically over the course of a long period of time, that took God out of the picture. And William Thomson, who would later be renamed Lord Kelvin by Queen Victoria, didn't want to have anything to do with any of that. Well, finally, after 4 years of Darwin's book being one of the most famous books in England, he relented and he read it. And then he took this new approach he was taking, which was called thermodynamics, this approach about everything wearing down in friction, basically, and becoming useless. And he applied that and the melting temperatures of slate and granite and a bunch of other minerals and new results on what was going on deep underneath the earth from the Greenwich Observatory in London. And he put that together with his favorite form of equations, Fourier's equations, very abstract, very difficult to understand. And he came to the conclusion that the earth used his mathematics, and he came to the conclusion that the earth was somewhere between 20 million and 400 million years old. In other words, it was too young to allow for Darwin's gradual evolution to take place. And he felt he'd done
Mm.
it. He torpedoed Darwin's evolution. And Darwin was fretting. He was very upset because one of the most prominent scientists of his time, a guy equipped with equations, had just said that his theory was all wrong. Nonetheless, who turned out to be right? Today, we believe the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. In other words, Lord Kelvin, William Thomson, was off by billions of years, 4 billion years. So again, if your equations come up with the wrong answers, you're supposed to modify them or discard them. It is time to discard the second law of thermodynamics because let's go back to the slinky.
Mm-hmm.
Do it again with your slinky. This time, stand at the bottom of the staircase and film the whole thing. Video it with your phone. Then run that video in reverse. And you will discover, you will see the slinky climbing the stairs, stair after stair after stair. That's what the universe is doing. That's what it's been doing for 13.73 billion years. It's doing the opposite of the theory that every scientist has to swear allegiance to prove he's a real scientist. This is a universe. In the book, I say, nature loves those who oppose her most. Nature is constantly pushing the boundaries to reach that next stair step up. And that, as I said, takes obstreperousness, rebelliousness, and moxie. So nature is not the calm, harmonious thing that we think she is. You know, we think that we are a cancer on the planet and that if only we went away and if only our technologies were removed from the earth, this would turn into a giant petting zoo. That is not at all true. Nature dislikes an equilibrium. Nature dislikes a harmony. Nature dislikes a gentle, peaceful place. Nature is about grabbing, reaching up to reach that next stair step up. So that's the basic idea of the book. And sex is in there because there's a second rule that's taken for granted in nature. And it comes from a guy named Pierre-Louis de Maupertuis in 1750, not long before the American Revolution. And it says that nature always takes the shortest path. That the shortest path between 2 points is a straight line, and that's the way nature does things. Well, if that were true, sex could not possibly exist, because sex is the longest line between 2 points you have ever imagined in your life. In fact, it's beyond the imaginings of most of us. Even experts in the subject forget bits and pieces because it's such a long, lengthy process. I mean, just think of yourself as a young man trying to find a mate. For many of us, that's torturous.
Yeah.
It is profoundly difficult, and moths have to go through that, and plants have to go through that, and of course, animals have to go through that. And females deliberately put males to the test. They put males to the torture. There is a perfume that orchard bee females have come to prefer. And in order to mix it, you have to go to 5 different kinds of sources: rotting wood, some flowers, the leaves of a particular tree. And you then have to mix all those elements in exactly the right combination. So remember, you're a male bee. You're not a lab chemist. But you have to mix these perfectly to show up with the perfume that the lady bees like. They are putting you to a torture. They're putting you through a test. Think of the peacock that Darwin liked to talk about. A peacock has giant tail feathers that may look gorgeous to you and me, but keep it from flying away when there's a predator on its tail. They make it very hard to avoid that predator because they provide a very easy handle by which that predator can grab you. Plus, you fly at half the speed of other birds. So this is a very costly proposition that sex sends you through. And sex is the ultimate, I mean, not to mention what happens with your genome, this 8 billion atom long string, molecular string, and it's getting together with the gene string of your mate, and then doing one of the most bizarre dances you've ever seen in your life. This is so complicated that it defies belief. And so the law of least effort, that nature always takes the shortest point between path between 2 points, can't possibly be true. And we are being preached that we are a curse. And in fact, we are the opposite of a curse. Nature is constantly reaching to the next stair step up. We are doing an awful lot of that reaching on her behalf.
There's a phrase I've coined that nature is our greatest teacher. Do you believe that?
Well, nature is a great teacher. We learn a hell of a lot from nature. And in fact, this book is the story of the rise of life. It's the story of the universe and how life arose. This is the most improbable thing imaginable. Life arose on a poison pill of a planet. This planet is the mother of all climate catastrophes. First of all, when it first coagulated, it spun around its axis every 6 hours. That meant for 3 hours you were in this poisonous thing called light, and for another 3 hours you were in this poisonous thing called darkness. And when you made the switch, the temperature went up or down 88 degrees. That's a giant climate change. Yeah. And it was happening every 3 hours. Then the Earth was tilted on its axis. And that meant that it went through 4 giant climate changes every year. And today, we don't think of them. We call them summer, fall, winter, and spring. Sorry, those are giant climate changes. Then this Earth has been snowball Earth at least once. The ice was so thick at the equator that it reached over a half a mile in depth. And then we have our ice ages. You know, look around you almost wherever you are, and you can see stones that were shoved down from the Arctic by glaciers. Um, and also the Earth has been through multiple global warmings, many global warmings. And at one point, the Earth was so warm that there were tropical dinosaurs living at the South Pole, eating tropical plants. So that is global warming beyond belief. And who brought it to us? Tailpipes and smokestacks, human innovations, human technology, not on your life. That was long before humans had arrived on this planet. It was brought to you by nature. So we have to adapt to the way this planet really is,
Yeah.
not the way that this bizarre theory, because environmentalists don't know it, but entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, entered environmentalism before environmentalism was really put together. It entered in 1920. A Nobel Prize winner dragged the second law of thermodynamics into what would become environmentalism. And it's been there ever since. So environmentalists think we're on the verge of doom. We're on the verge of catastrophe. In fact, the universe works in the opposite direction. Yes, it has dooms and catastrophes. It's had many of them. Our job is to overcome those dooms and catastrophe. In order to get as far as we have today, we've had to be doom riders and catastrophe tamers. We were born in the days of ice ages. And then we have a global warming that is bizarre. And it's the global warming in which we've existed for 10, 12,000 years or 11,000 years. And that global warming is overdue to disappear. So if we're going to get anywhere, we have to learn to manage the climate. And if taking carbon dioxide is out of the atmosphere does that, that's great. But that's just the first of climate stabilization moves. The climate stabilization move I'm recommending is putting up solar farms in space and transmitting the energy down to Earth with harmless microwaves like the waves that power your phone. And they don't power your phone, but they get the signal to your phone.
Right.
And doing that, solar energy on Earth has major problems. When you put together a solar farm down here, you wipe out an ecosystem. That solar farm is only gathering energy a small amount of time per day because it has problems, it has obstacles. And one of those obstacles is called night, and the other obstacle is called clouds. But in space, the solar energy is 24/7. It's non-stop. There's nothing getting in the way. And there's approximately 5 times as much energy in solar panels in space as there is on Earth. And it's an infinite supply. So using solar energy from space, we could get to net zero easily.
We're talking with Howard Bloom, and we're talking about his latest work, and he's got a lot of work out there, folks. The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. Howard Bloom is his name, and the website we're going to send you to is, of course, howardbloom.institute, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I am Reverend Dr. D. He is Howard Bloom, and we are talking about his latest work, The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. And it's a story of greening a planet of disaster and strife. Now, what you were just saying about climate change, and I will tell you that my position is I don't care about the science. My position is we need to clean up our home, period. It doesn't matter whether or not we had anything to do with what's happening. Forget about that. I even asked people, I said, when I was a kid growing up, on Saturdays especially, and I grew up in a family, 4 sisters, a brother, and 2 parents. And on Saturdays, we were given chores to do, whether it was inside or outside. And sometimes it was mowing the lawn, pulling the weeds. Sometimes it was changing the beds, doing the laundry, making sure the dishes were done. All of these things that we do every week because it was such a big family. And I would ask them, I said, did you usually do that? Maybe at least once a week, the family would get together and they would start doing that kind of stuff. Why would you do that? Why? Well, because we want a clean place to live. But was it dependent upon whether your neighbors did it or not? Well, no, it wasn't. Then why do you care whether China, India, Pakistan, or any of the other countries around the planet are doing what they can to clean up our planet? Because it needs to be cleaned up. And you're saying, well, they're not doing it, so I'm not going to do it. then your house would be a disaster in very short order. I saw a documentary, Howard, with Greg Braden just recently, and he talked about the very thing you are discussing. He took politics out of it, he took religion out of it, and he showed the scientific facts that we've been through. The temperatures on this planet have gone up and down. And if people think that in our time now, this is the hottest it's been, you better look at the science and the history of our planet. It's been hotter. And yet, guess what? We're still here. So doesn't that speak to the resilience of the human being, of man on the planet to survive these ups and downs?
And it speaks of the resilience of life. Remember, so we had this cataclysm of the planet 4 billion years ago when
Hmm.
life first began. Now, if you and I had been sitting around a coffee table at the beginning of the universe and had watched the whole universe unfold, and we'd watch it go up staircase, stair after stair after stair, first from nothing to a big bang, then from space, time, and speed in the Big Bang to the first precipitation of the first things, quarks, and then from quarks to atoms, and from atoms to galaxies, and from galaxies to stars and planets and moons, all the way up to life. We know that that's a slinky going up the stairs, not a slinky going down the stairs.
Hmm.
But if we'd been sitting there 4 billion years ago, and you had been the wild-eyed dreamer, and you'd said, well, we have these things called molecules, and most of them are probably 6 or 10 atoms long at most. And I predict that they are going to weave themselves together into a form that has an entirely new property that this cosmos has never seen, called life. I would say you're crazy, especially on this poison pill of Earth, which is an impossible place to live. And yet life basically raised its fist and said, screw you to the existing status quo, and knit itself together anyway, and lived in flood and disaster and catastrophe. So the astonishing thing is that life has stuck around here stubbornly for 4 billion years, constantly cranking out new forms and new properties. And in fact, life has been the maker of at least 5 great space programs.
Hmm.
First, life lived in the sea. Now, imagine you're a young obstreperous bacteria living in the sea. Actually, bacteria live in groups of billions, but your group is obstreperous and has this bizarre idea in its mind. Not that bacteria have minds, but in your biological equivalent to a mind. You want to go up. There's 70% of the Earth is covered with ocean, and life has grown up in the ocean. The ocean has become the bosom of nature as far as life is concerned. But there's 30% of the surface of the planet that is this bizarre and poisonous stuff. It's raw stone. There's nothing to eat up there. There's no place to rest or take refuge up there. There are no places to build a habitat up there. Being up there is extremely dangerous. How could life possibly survive? And your group is outrageous enough to say, I'm going to go up there and live. And if I were your parent, I would say, but look, everything that you know and everything that you feast on is down here in the sea. The sea is your mother. The sea is where you belong. You should, if you have the extra energy to try to go up on the land, you should be spending that energy to uplift the poor and the downtrodden here in the ocean. A Bernie Sanders approach. Um, and 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 but your group went up on land anyway, and endured, survived the impossibilities of the land, and in the end, did that prove to be fruitful? Well, in fact, there's 80 times more biomass, living stuff, on the land, that mere 30%, than there is in the 70%, than there is in the vastness of the sea. So that was the first space venture.
Hmm.
The next one came when plants came together and decided they were mosses, basically, and mosses dared to lift themselves 2 inches off the ground. Now, 2 inches compared to the size of a cell is almost going to space itself. And they were even more audacious. They were sexual. And when it came time to shoot their sperm, they shot it as high as they could get it so that it would travel on the wind, hopefully to another planet. They shot it 5 inches high. Now, that's the equivalent of going into space. It's actually 13.83 miles into the sky, comparatively speaking. Not quite space, but way, way up there. That was the second space program. 400 million years ago, when animals came to the land, a bunch of those animals decided on something absolutely insane. They were going to try to take to the sky. Now, again, if I had been their parent and you had been this daring little beast trying to do this, I would have said you're absolutely crazy. There's nothing up there. There's no food up there for you to eat. There is no place up there for you to make shelter. That place will kill you. If you fall from a great height, you're dead. It's over for you. Stick with the earth. The earth is your nurturing mother. The earth is your bosom. The earth gives you everything good. And if you got that extra energy, use it to uplift the poor and the oppressed. Don't do this foolishness. Well, these little things took to the skies, and they're called insects. And they invented flight. That's another space program. And a couple of 100 million years later, another group attempted that, all on its own. And it's the case of the loony dinosaurs who flew. Young dinosaurs had this bizarre idea of taking to the skies. And again, their parents would have said, don't do it. It goes against nature. How dare you go against nature? And these things took to the skies and they became birds. So how many of the dinosaurs who were conservatives, who stuck to the earth, who stuck to the bosom of nature, did you see this morning when you woke up and stepped outside the house? You saw none. No Tyrannosauruses, no Brontosauruses. And how many of the loony dinosaurs who flew did you see? You saw dozens of them. They're birds. And if that's not enough to give you nature's message, birds live 60% longer. Flying animals in general, including bats, live 60% longer than us creatures who walk on the surface of the land. Is nature trying to tell us something? Go up, go up, go up. Reaching to the next stair step up is your job. It's your mandate in life.
This is fascinating, and I have to tell you that I, there's an aspect of our existence that I have struggled with, and we all have for one degree or another, and that's the dualism that exists here on this planet. And I say that it exists here because it's a matter of perception. You know, you're talking about the universe. Well, if you take a look at the macrocosmic universe through a telescope and you're watching things flying around and doing their thing, we're not in fear. We sit there going, ooh, ah, kind of like we're watching fireworks. Well,
Right,
let's take it to the subatomic level, looking through an electron microscope at some of the smallest elements, particles in the universe, and the same thing is happening even at that level. And we go, ooh and ah. But when we bring it to what I like to call where we live, the middle cosmic level,
right. Middle
there's
Earth,
judgment. There's,
right,
oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. And you know the Chinese story of the farmer and his son, and the neighbor comes over and says, "Hey, how are things going?" And well, my son did this, that, and the other thing. Oh, well, that's good. And the farmer says, "Well, who's to say whether it's good or bad?" And the next day, the neighbor comes over and the farmer asks, "How are things going?" And says, well, this happened and that happened. Oh, that's bad. And the farmer says, "Well, who's to say whether that's good or bad?" And the story goes on. And so I sit here and I go, the stuff that's going on here, whether it's my wife and I going through this whole moving thing and dealing with the landlord and escrow and packing and all of that stuff, that's just life. That is just what happens. There is no judgment. It's neither good nor bad. It just is.
right.
But our perceptions, we have been trained, or if you want to say programmed, to judge, to judge, constantly judge whether things are good or bad, instead of just saying, hey, this is just the way that it is. Um, I want to ask you in that light, how much of our perception, and maybe if I can take it to another level, our consciousness has an interplay with all that you've talked about in terms of how things move forward in the human construct called time.
Right. Well, I've worked once upon a time, 2005. I was in California, and I saw a guy speak, and I have this little mechanism apparently in my gut that tells me when I work when there's a superstar. And my gut said this guy is not just and that's been effective with people like Shaka Khan and Joan Jett and Michael Jackson and Prince and
Mhm.
Bob Marley and a bunch of people like that, with whom I worked in many cases before they were ever famous at all. So this guy, he was in the space. He allegedly was in the space business, but in fact, he hadn't even launched a tin can with a firecracker inside, and he was being mocked and scorned. But my gut said this guy is a myth, and his example is going to be followed by kids 115 years from now. So I got him on the phone 4 times. We had conversations, and I couldn't tell him why I was calling him because that thing in your gut doesn't explain itself. It can
Mm-mm.
take years before you come up with a verbal explanation for what's going on in your gut. And he had said the following things that impressed me. He said, when I got out of school, I asked my things, what 3 things would make the greatest difference to humanity in my lifetime? And my answer was the internet, alternative energy, and space. So I went into the internet and I helped build PayPal and I made close to $1 billion. And then I skipped alternative energy and went directly to space. And as I said, he hadn't launched a thing in those days. It
Mhm.
was, to me, it was remarkably compulsive. Um, and today, his name is Elon Musk. He's the richest man in the world today. And he has dared take us to space. And he could only do that making judgments. He had judged those 3 things that would change humanity to be profoundly important. He had dedicated his life to those things. And Elon does not live the way normal people live. He works all his waking hours. Yes, he does some recreational drugs, but he basically works. He often lives under his desk, so that he doesn't have to lose any time getting back and forth to his work. So he can only do that if he has a strong sense of judgment, if there are certain things he believes in with all his heart and soul. And it takes all your heart and soul to change reality the way Elon has changed reality. When Elon was starting, we probably had a maximum of 8 rocket launches from the United States a year. Um, Thanks to what Elon has built, we now have 150 rocket launches a year. 150. It's a whole radically different proposition. We have regular access to space. He has put together the first space transport company with regularly scheduled flights. That's astonishing. Um, so, to accomplish something like that, to do nature's bidding, which is defy me, rebel against me, nature loves those who oppose her most, you have to make strong value judgments and be profoundly committed because your persistence is going to be tried every day for the rest of your life if you pursue your goals.
And that's a very important aspect of what we're talking about here in terms of that. I have a regular guest on my program. His name is Dennis Henson, and he wrote an inspirational book called Real Impact Daily Inspiration. It's filled with stories of people who, as he and I talk every week, knew what they wanted. They had a goal. For example, we're right now in the middle of the series on Walt Disney and how he stuck to his guns all the way in spite of all of the ups and downs that he had. And he created, of course, one of the happiest places on earth, Disneyland, and everything that's spun off from that, or
Right.
Sylvester Stallone, or any of the other people that we talked about. And so you're absolutely right in that respect. That if we don't have a goal, then what's the point of living? Because I heard it was I don't know if it was in your documentary or I heard it somewhere else that without a goal, there's no point in living. I mean, it's just, that's why we're here to
Right.
have one goal and achieve it, and then have another one and achieve it, and have another one and then achieve it. My goal right now with my wife is to get off this mountain here in Santa Barbara and move out to San Bernardino and Lake Arrowhead and a house that we're going to buy and spend. I don't know how many years we'll be there. Our ultimate goal is Ireland. That's where we really want to go,
Amazing.
and we've been there twice. It's been over 20 years since we've been there, and we miss it terribly. But that seems to be a real focal point for a lot of folks these days. Is you've got to decide, you've got to choose. And I have a book called Choices: 5 Steps for Life. Well, what is the first step? Make a choice. Well, but I don't know what
Yes.
choice. I don't know what choice to make.
Right.
Well, then you need to educate yourself. I always encourage people to go back into their childhood. I was a kid growing up. I loved playing in the dirt and so forth. And then when I was 19, I took an aptitude test that told me I should be a farmer. Well, I'm a broadcast producer,
Right.
been that way for 45 years. But at the same time, where we live, I love being on the land and working with my hands and the soil and all these different things. Having animals, we have chickens and cats, and we've had dogs, and on and on and on. But it's wanting. There's one big goal. I don't know about you, Howard, but one big goal for me that I'm trying to impart through this program is I want to be happy. I want to be happy, and I want everyone else to be happy. Now, I'm not talking about being happy 24/7, 365. I don't,
Right.
but to have a certain level of contentment, but at the same time challenge myself. And the universe does well at challenging us in that regard. What about you? Do you have a an abiding goal that's been with you most of your life that you have wanted to achieve that maybe you have from time to time, or maybe you haven't yet, but you're still working on it?
No, I have a goal that's been with me since the age of 10. When I was 10, I was a lost child. Um, my parents didn't have any time for me. They didn't pay any attention to me. And other kids wanted to have nothing to do with me except to humiliate me and throw my hat back and forth over my head. And so there I was, a lost kid, sitting in my family's big living room, and a book appeared in my lap one day. And this is very strange, Richard, because when you're 10 years old, you know the location of every book that your parents have because they've
Mm-hmm.
been sitting on the shelves and nobody has touched them. They've already read them. And let me get a lozenge here. Um,
Sure.
okay. So a book appeared in my lap. I have no idea where it came from because it wasn't one of the books my parents had had on the shelves. And it said, um, the first two rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo and told the story all wrong, but I needed the wrong version, the heroic version, that Galileo would have been willing to go to the stake to defend his truth. And number two, look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. And that was it. I got hooked. And I've been in science ever since. And over the course of the next few years, I read 2 books a day: science fiction and science.
Mm.
And I got the impression, because there was no teacher teaching me this stuff, that the goal of science is to be omniscient. It's to know and understand everything. Um, and so that's been my goal, to understand things through the lens of science ever since I was 10 years old. And it's inescapable. It's my central, my core, everything. When I dove into a field I didn't know anything about for 20 years, popular culture. Popular culture was the culture of the kids who used to beat me up. It wasn't my culture. I listened to Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Bartok, Stravinsky, and nonetheless, I got an opportunity to go culture diving into popular culture. And I ended up founding a PR firm in the music industry. And it became the biggest PR firm in the industry. Why? I was applying science to what I was doing, along with a deep sense of soul, a deep sense of personal passion and of the importance of personal passion. And I performed and had the ecstatic experience of performing. So equipped with those tools, I was credited with reinventing PR in the music industry. And I worked with, as I said, Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, David Byrne, etc. And that was my field work in my science. And then I got to go back to my science full time. And I've been on the quest of that kind of omniscience that science must have as an aspiration my whole life. And I have two more, I'm 82. I walk 8 miles a day, but I have two more books I have to write. And because it takes 5 years to write a book, I got to be around by the age of 92.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a mission. And as you pretty much stated, life is a series of stair steps and challenges, and you have to climb each stair step. Well, I know which 2 stair steps I need to climb next. And if I'm still around after I've promoted those 2 books, I'll find a third.
We're talking with Howard Bloom. Howard Bloom is a writer, a prolific writer in that we have the case of the sexual cosmos available for you. Go to howardbloom.institute. We will be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Howard Bloom's my guest. I'm Richard Dugan, Reverend Dr. D, and I want to dive a little deeper into Howard, and I want to find out a little bit more about who you are more philosophically. As now, you've described a little bit of your upbringing and the, if I'm using the correct word, the neglect of your parents and the abuse of your peers, if you will. My parents were not neglectful, but my peers were along the same lines as yours. I was bullied in school more because of my visual impairment at the time. I was legally blind until I was 38, had a lens implant. Now I'm driving all over the place. But I want to ask you about your personal philosophy slash faith. Where did you hail from, and let's say as a child, and where are you today?
Well, I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. It was a godforsaken town for me. It was very hard to find people who resonated to my frequency, very hard. So I was isolated and alone a good part of the time. And I was pursuing science. My parents, well, you're not a popular kid if you're reading 2 books a day, because you read 1 book a day under the desk and you pay no attention to your teachers. And teachers are like you and me. We need attention. We need recognition. And I wasn't giving my teachers any of that. So I wasn't very popular with my teachers, but I was absorbing information at a ferocious rate. And then my mom, when I was 12, got me an appointment with the head of the graduate physics department of the University of Buffalo, my hometown university. And I don't know why he did this, but he spent an hour with me. And the hottest issue of the time was called Big Bang versus Steady State Theory of the Universe. Big Bang Theory, you know, everything started with a Big Bang. Steady State Theory said everything was constantly, it was there all the time. There was no beginning to the universe. And I met some people just 2 weeks ago who believe in that today and are they're very well schooled in science. So we were discussing the Big Bang versus Steady State Theory and the implications of the Doppler shift, which had a big impact on these 2 different theories. And when he came out of his office, he put his hand on my shoulder and said to my mom, "You don't need to save for grad school for him. He'll get fellowships in theoretical physics at any school he wants." Meanwhile, I was busy co-designing a computer. Remember, this is 12 years ago. This is 1955. Computers were new. Computers were only about 15 to 20 years old at that point. and I co-designed a computer that won a science fair award. Um, and I built my first Boolean algebra machine. This is all at the age of 12. And my mom set up something else interesting for me. She got me tutored in outside the box science by the head of research and development for the Moog Valve Company, which I just thought was a local plumbing operation. I was dead wrong. It took me until 15 years ago when I was researching one of my books to discover that the Moog Valve Company had made the valves for the first airplane to break the sound barrier and for the first plane to take a human to the edge of space. So, and he taught me some very interesting stuff. So and by 16, I was working during the summer at in the biochemistry labs of the biggest cancer research facility in the world, which happened to be in Buffalo, the Roswell Park Memorial Cancer Research Center. And I wasn't the least bit interested in the work we were doing. I tried not to break too many test tubes. That's difficult. I'm clumsy. And I tried not to break any of the multi-million-dollar machines that I was tending. But in reality, what I was doing was at lunchtime. At lunchtime, the scientist who had been put over my head to watch over me and I went down to lunch with a couple of friends who were 3 years older than I was. And during the course of the summer, I came up with a solution to what was called the charge, parity, and time problem, which is if matter and antimatter are created in equal amounts at the same time, where's all the antimatter? And my solution was a donut, a bagel, and with a tiny, tiny little hole, and the Big Bang is in that hole, and then the normal universe comes out of the top of the bagel, the antimatter universe comes out of the bottom of the bagel, and the two of them accelerate at tremendous speeds away from each other. And then, roughly 7 billion years later, they reach the peak of the bagel. And then they start descending toward each other. Why? And with increasing rapidity. Why? Because the one language they share in common is gravity. And the gravitational pull pulls them toward each other until they annihilate at the outer edge of the bagel and make another Big Bang. So, and that predicted dark energy 38 years in advance. So my childhood from the age of 10 was spent in science. And science is my base. And science was my base. What I was doing in the popular culture was the equivalent of what Margaret Mead had done with the Samoans. Margaret Mead was a modern American woman, and she went off to Samoa, and she became a Samoan. She ate, lived, and breathed the Samoan way of life. And she became so good at it, so very, very quintessentially Samoan, that the Samoans voted her a chief, even though women were not allowed to be chiefs and foreigners were not allowed to be chiefs. That deep immersion was what powered her anthropology. She wrote several books about it. So I was diving into the culture, a popular culture, the way that she had dived into Samoa. And I came out of it with an awful lot of new understandings. So and then in 1988, after 17 years after I founded my PR business, and it was the leading business in the field, I came down with an illness that nobody could diagnose, but it was serious. When it was 98 degrees and everybody else around me was sweating and hoping for a breeze, I was chilled and I was shivering. And when the temperature went down to 40 degrees, I was sweating. I felt overheated. I had no idea what was going on. I was becoming very weak. And I went into my office one day, pulled the staff together, all 15 people, and said, I don't know what's happening to me. I could be dying, but I can't be here anymore. So I'm giving you the business. And the next day, a competitor from California called and offered me a huge honking amount of money for my business. And I had to tell him I gave it to my staff yesterday. So And then for 3 years, I was disoriented because I was too weak to have another person in the room with me, and I was too weak to talk. And so I was stuck in my bedroom.
Mm.
And I realized that if I got a computer set up next to my bed, I could continue working. And what was my work? Well, books had raised me the way that Mowgli in the Jungle Book was raised by wolves. And I
Mm.
felt that if books had saved me, if men from 350 years ago, Galileo and Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the inventor of the microscope, had reached out across a distance of 350 years and saved me when I was lost, then it was my obligation to write books that would save the next kid 350 years down the road.
Mm.
And that's what I have been doing ever since.
Howard Bloom Institute, or that's howardbloom.institute. That's the website we want you to go to. Get a copy of his book, The Case of the Sexual Cosmos, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. One of the other areas I'd love to talk to you about, Howard Bloom, is you were involved in, when I was a teenager, you were involved in the music industry. And I have to say that one of my favorites was one of the number one artists of the 70s, John Denver, and he was very concerned about the environment. But one of the things that strikes me so much about him is the fact that he loved to sing to people. It was the thing that he lived for, in spite of the challenges that he had in his personal life. And I've read his biography and so forth. And I've got most all of his albums, and I listen to him all the time on Spotify, even today at 65. How important was music then for you, and how important is it today?
Well, I couldn't I couldn't do my schoolwork. Once I got serious about doing schoolwork, I couldn't do it without music. Um, when I was 13, I had my bar mitzvah. When I was 12, I realized I was an atheist, but blocked that from my mind because I had a bar mitzvah coming up, and it would be the only party in Buffalo that I'd ever been invited to. And plus, there would be presents, including checks. And who could resist that?
Yeah.
So I did the bar mitzvah. The rabbi called me the voice. That was very kind of him. And then I confessed that I was an atheist. And what question was I answering already?
Having to
Um,
do with the importance of music then and now.
right. So I took the checks, cashed them, and bought a brand new thing called a hi-fi system. And a hi-fi system meant that you had a woofer and a tweeter, a great big speaker for low notes and a tiny little speaker for high notes. And it had a spindle, an automatic spindle, and there were these brand new things called long playing records, and I would put six of them on the turntable and have them running for 3 hours while I was, or more, they're more than 3 hours, while I was doing my work. And then I would put another six on and have them playing while I was sleeping at
Hmm.
night. I needed music. It was an absolute necessity. It was like breathing for me.
Hmm.
But I never imagined having a career in music because when I tried to take a trombone class, I was influenced by two jazz trombonists who had been famous back then. I was thrown out of the class within 10 days. Um, when I tried my mom wanted me to be a violinist. And so she got me the second violinist at the Buffalo Philharmonic and as a teacher. And one day I was scratching away on these poor cat strings in front of the teacher, standing in my living room. And all of a sudden I saw this fist the size of a ham coming at me from the right. And it went straight across my windscreen, my field of view. It smashed into the violin and it sent the violin flying to the far end of the room where fortunately there were velvet drapes that were crumpled on the bottom. So it fell harmlessly on the velvet drapes and he stormed out. So that was the end of my violin playing. And I wanted to be a jazz pianist. So I started I started lessons in piano in June, the beginning of a summer. And when we got to August, for one thing, these were very unusual piano lessons, because we would do piano lessons for half an hour and we'd talk philosophy for another hour. And at the end of the summer, the teacher said, look, I got to be honest with you. The minute I saw you could never play the piano. But I took you in because all of my normal students were going off to summer camp and I needed to pay my rent. But now I believe if you continue working as hard as you have worked, that you will be able to play the piano. But basically, the bottom line to all of this, you don't belong in music, Bloom. You just don't belong. So when I ended up in music, which was an accident, um, I I learned that there was an instrument that most people don't know exists, much less know how to play, but it's the equivalent of a cathedral organ, where the whole cathedral is part of the sound system of the organ.
Mm-hmm.
It's the star making machinery. It starts with that feeling in your gut that tells you this person is a star. No matter how unknown this person is a star. And then it went on to a lecture I gave you if you wanted me to represent you. And I would tell you, if you want me to represent you and create an artificial mask for you and then sit back like a guy in a plaid suit with a cigar and say, kid, with this image, I'm going to make you a star, then I'm going to send you to my best competitor right now. If you're going to work with me, you have to understand that music is not about an exchange of pieces of plastic. It is not about an exchange of money. It is not about, it's about one thing and one thing only. It is a pure exchange of human soul. And so I will spend 6 weeks once you hire me, if you hire me, studying everything you've ever done, every lyric you've ever written, every prose piece you've ever written, every interview you've ever done. And then I will insist on flying out to see you in your own environment with no intercessors, no wives, no managers, no assistants, just you and me in a room. And my job will be to find what I call the gods inside of you. When you're sitting, one day you're on deadline to finish an album. You sit down in front of a blank computer screen, a blank piece of paper to write a lyric. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You know that you have no ability to write a lyric. You have no idea of how you've ever written a lyric in your life. But on a reasonable day, by 4 o'clock, there's a lyric in front of you. My job is to find the gods inside of you that wrote that lyric. You go on stage in front of 700 or 70,000 people. You feel the faces of the audience melting. You feel their eyes widening, and you have an out-of-body experience. You're up on the ceiling watches as something dances your body, as the energy flows from the audience through you like a pipe up to someplace around your head, is utterly transmogrified, and then flows back down through you to the audience again. And it's a continuous feedback loop. You have no idea of how it's happening. You feel that you're being danced as if you were a marionette. My job is to find the gods inside of you that danced you on that stage that night. And if you're willing to accept that, I'll work with you.
You know, I have written 2 songs. One back in 1993, I was in a personal growth program, kind of like LifeSpring or EST, but it was absolutely free, and you gave what you felt comfortable giving.
Right.
And then the second song I wrote 5 years ago, about this time 5 years ago, and it's a song entitled "I'm a Good Man Doing the Best I Can." And I've had the privilege of singing it. It's on YouTube on my channel and all of that. And one of the things that I've noticed about much of the music that resonates with people is when it's, you talk about the soul, it's that song that really speaks from the heart of the lyricist, the songwriter, the musician, whatever the case may be. And I just one of them is Barry Manilow's song "One Voice," singing in the darkness. All it takes is one voice, and you are one voice, as you were referred to, the voice, who is singing your song through the books that you write, the interviews that you do, the people that you communicate with. What is it that you would like for people to hear? What is the message? If there's a core message from Howard Bloom to whether it be Reverend Dr. D or to the world, what is that message that you hope they get from what you're leaving behind when you do go? Please don't go soon.
Right. It's that first lesson I learned when I was 10 years old. Your life, dedicate your life to the truth at any price, including the price of your life, and to looking at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before. Look for
Mm,
the things that you and your friends all take for granted. Look for hidden assumptions that are invisible to you. Lift them out of the darkness. Turn them over. See what they look like if you reverse them, if you turn them backwards or forwards, and then proceed from there.
mm,
Never take anything for granted. Everything is a material miracle, waiting for you to discover why it's astonishing and awesome, and waiting for you to question it.
mm.
And what is that questioning all about? Reaching the next level in that stair step of complexity that the cosmos is urging us
Yeah.
to lift our eyes to, lift our hands to, lift our efforts and our souls to, and help nature take that next grand step up.
You know, you mentioned that you were an atheist. I've had atheists on this program, and what I have found is atheists are probably more spiritual than those people who claim to be of a faith, of a belief, of a philosophy. And that fascinates me. Um, I'm just enthralled by the opportunity to talk to you again. I'm glad that we're able to do so. I hope we can again sooner rather than later,
Yes, that would
as
be
we
nice.
continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan with Howard Bloom, howardbloom.institute. It is the book, The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. And you also have a documentary. I love the title of it. Share it with us real quickly
It's
before we wrap things up.
the grand unified theory of Howard Bloom. And that comes from the fact that in 1998, I started to put together a computer table of contents of all of my stuff.
How many pages is that?
The table of contents of God, it has 12,000 listings in it. So it's probably
Wow.
about 70 pages long.
Mm.
And it starts by saying a modest proposition, the grand unified theory of everything in the universe, including the human soul. And then a filmmaker came along and started looking at my work and said, no, 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 you've got to retitle that. It's the grand unified theory of everything in the universe, including sex, violence, and the human soul. So, and that'll be my next book, The Grand Unified Theory of Everything in the Universe, including sex, violence, and the human soul. But because it takes 5 years to write a book, that's off in the distance.
Well, I hope we get to talk to you when it's finished. I really do. And maybe even between here and there, because the subject matter that I would love to continue covering with you just continues to grow. I tell people, my guests as well, that the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride, and I'm a very curious person. I
Right.
have first of all, thank you again for joining us here on the program and contributing to the work that we are trying to do to change the world for the better for everyone. Thank you.
And thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure, and I hope to see you again soon.
I have three final questions that I ask
Yes.
all of my guests, and it's been a long time, so the questions may have changed since the last time we talked. But before I ask you those questions, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all 9 times at richarddugan.com, streaming there, and also podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're also on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. Please subscribe and click notification. And please go to Amazon.com to get a copy of my book, Choices 5 Steps for Life. It's available on Kindle, hardcover, and paperback. Audible is soon to be released. And then if you can leave us a tip, we'd greatly appreciate that. Our tip jar is called PayPal. Speaking of Howard Bloom and PayPal, and all you have to do is go to the homepage of richarddugan.com, and there are two links, one to Amazon for the book and one for PayPal for the tip jar. And finally, we want you to spend some time during this decade of perfect vision. Please spend some time in that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place where no one else can go but you, and listen to that still small voice. With all of that being said, we go to our final three questions for our very special guest. Again, thanks to him for joining us here on the program. First of those three questions is, who is Howard Bloom?
Well, I like the summary. Forgive me for the utter unabashedness of this, that Channel 4 TV in Britain said. And it said Howard Bloom is the Einstein, Newton, Darwin, and Freud of the 21st century. That'll do just fine as far as I'm concerned.
What gets you up in the morning?
I have a sense of purpose in life that is unstoppable. I once tried to kill myself and tried to stop it. It wouldn't stop. It refused. There is, we all have a life force, and if we are fortunate enough to be tuned in to our what you could call our destiny or our calling, then you have a reason to get up every morning.
Yeah. And finally, and I kind of hope you get the movie reference here. What was your best day?
Oh my God. I have so many good days now because of my girlfriend. She is just wonderful, and she puts a whole new quality of joy into my life that I is so beyond the normal mundane use of the word joy that I'm without words for it.
Yeah.
Because we play and enjoy ourselves every day, despite the fact that I work all my waking hours.
Yeah. And that's actually rather humorous that you say that, because in your documentary, you actually bring up the subject of looking for a girlfriend. You're in a cab and you say, wow, but I really don't have time because I'm doing all of these other things. However, Howard, you found time.
Yes, apparently.
Howard, thanks again. I thank you so much. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to long. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.